Hi Year 11, today we're going to be going through some quick hints and tips to help you focus your revision for GCSE English Literature. So tip 1 is to know the text. You know that in your exam there are a range of different texts that students across the country are studying. We have specifically chosen and taught you the following texts: Macbeth, Christmas Carol, and An Inspector Calls, alongside 15 poems from the Power and Conflict cluster. You will ignore all the other texts on the day other than Macbeth, A Christmas Carol, Inspector Calls, and the Power and Conflict question. You will also answer on 2 unseen poems, which is in the very final section, very final pages of Literature Paper 2, but everything else you will ignore other than the texts that are mentioned on this slide. So make sure that you know these texts incredibly well. You've got 15 poems here, which you know you'll have to talk about 2 of them. The more that you know, the more depth that you know the text in, the better chance you will have at the exams. If you limit yourself by only learning a couple of moments, or for example, a couple of poems, you're going to make life harder for you in terms of attempting those exam questions. Tip 2, know the plots, and that's not just for the actual narratives of like Macbeth and Christmas Carol and Inspector Calls, but it's also of the poems. The poems are just 15 short stories, so know the plots and what happens in each one. It's often really helpful to create a timeline of the events. You could do this through the entire text. You could do this for each of the acts or staves or poems, but within those, try and pick out 3 or 4, possibly maximum 5 pivotal moments that happen. So for example, if you were going to look at the play Macbeth, and if you're going to look maybe specifically at the character of Macbeth, you could pick out 5 moments below. Macbeth meeting the witches, getting the prophecies, using those to then murder Duncan, which obviously sets off that chain of events of guilt and kind of his hamartia. Banquo appearing to him after he has obviously had his best friend murdered, and the paranoia that kind of kicks in. Meeting the witches for a second time and getting a new set of prophecies through the apparitions, and then finally all of this leading to Macbeth's tragic downfall and the restoration of the great chain of being. So picking out those pivotal moments can be really helpful to give you those anchors from within each of the texts. Tip 3, learn your quotations. Those of you who are aiming for our highest grades, our kind of 7s to 9s, rereading the text, listening to them on audiobook over and over will help you pick up lots and lots of short, memorable quotations. The reason your teachers know the text so well is because we've gone over them so many times. That repetition is a really important part of learning. If you find it a little bit harder to remember quotations, then go a little bit smaller. Aim for maybe 4 or 5 what we call killer quotations for each text, each poem. Learn these off by heart, practice reciting them, put them on flashcards, set them to music if you find it easier to remember things to music, and make sure you can explain what they mean, why they're important, and how the writer creates meaning within them. That is what will get you those kind of like pass grade and above marks. So if you can't quite remember what a killer quotation is, they're short and easy to remember. Good quotations do not have to be whole long sentences. One word can be just as effective. Often they contain powerful language, which helps you to plan some really impressive analysis. They're structurally significant. They provide links across the text, so they act as almost like a little bit of a springboard into other texts that you can remember, other quotations that you can remember rather. And they will cover most themes and characters, so you can use them for virtually any exam questions. Don't limit yourself to quotations that are really specific for just kind of one moment. Try and learn some that killer quotations, multitasking, can be applied to anything. So an example of a killer quotation is on the slide here. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. So Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 4. And if we think about how to revise these, you could write them out and then think about the questions around the edge. Who says it, when, to whom? What does it mean literally? But what does that more significantly imply? What's the kind of hidden meaning behind it? What language is there in the quotation that you can zoom in on? And then what other quotations or moments across the text can we link it to? And there's an example there of a completed kind of revision poster, a little bit rough and ready, as you can see, because it's just all part of that kind of quick revision. Tip 4, create some character profiles. These are really important because essay questions are often centred on characters, or they link characters to key themes. So you need to know your characters really, really well. And each character, as stupid as it sounds, is exactly that. These are not real people. They haven't made choices. The writer has deliberately crafted them to link to the message of the text. We can talk about characters as symbols, as kind of embodiments of, maybe allusions to in some cases. So make sure that you think really carefully about not just who the characters are, what they do, but how they're being used by the writers. So obviously it's going to vary between the text and the poems, but an example character profile, for example, for an Inspector Calls, could include some of the things that are set out below. I always like to talk about that kind of, for me, I'll remember the key stage direction at the start. How are they described in the stage direction at the start? What are they like at the very beginning? So maybe Inspector Calls in Act 1, then how do they change in Act 2? And what are they like by Act 3? Has there been a development? Have they become a what we call either a rounded or a dynamic character in that they've changed, or are they a flat character or a static character? The way they are at the start is basically the way they are at the end. So some of the questions on the slide here are specific to an Inspector Calls. If you were thinking about A Christmas Carol or about Macbeth, then it could be the same sort of premise with that kind of at first, however, by the end, which links us really nicely to any theses that you then create. And there's an example here for Mr. Burling. So I've got my 3 facts: that he's a factory owner, a self-made man, a member of the nouveau riche, and he's the family patriarch. And then I've got a slightly more specific character profile here. So at the start, what's he like? Initial reaction, involvement with Eva Smith. Does he accept responsibility? How does his behaviour change? And when he discovers the inspector's not real, how does he react? And you could use that exact pro forma for every single character within an Inspector Calls. Finally, use the resources that are out there already. So websites such as BBC Bitesize, SparkNotes, Physics and Maths Tutor, don't be put off by the name. It's got resources for English and probably a lot of your other subjects. Educate, Seneca, they're all fantastic websites. Mr. Bruff's playlists on YouTube are also brilliant. And we now have the Seeds Academy YouTube channel, which will increasingly have more and more videos on there. So make sure that you're using what is already out there as part of your ongoing revision. If you've got any further questions, if you're not sure about what you're doing, please talk to your teachers. That is what we're here for. Go well, guys. You've got this, and it'll all be worth it come August.